Preparations for a coup d'etat in Russia have accelerated. The operations Spiderweb 1 and Spiderweb 2 and the transfer to the New York Times of confidential information about the internal correspondence of the Federal Security Service characterizing China as an enemy country create this conclusion. It seems that some group in the Russian elite is trying to send a message about the existence of an unofficial Moscow that considers China an enemy, unlike the official Moscow that talks a lot about Russian-Chinese friendship. If the unofficial Moscow succeeds in spreading the idea that the Putin regime, which created the conditions for this, by accusing China of intending to seize Russian territories in the Far East, is a traitor to the homeland, sold to Beijing, a change of power in Russia will soon be inevitable. The implementation of operations Spiderweb 1 and Spiderweb 2 may also be the beginning of the path to military defeat, which will create favorable conditions for a change of power. The law of quantity turns into quality is in force. Publicly, Kremlin dictator Vladimir Putin proclaims the inviolability of his growing friendship with China. But in the corridors of the FSB headquarters, the secret intelligence unit calls the Chinese the enemy. The unit, which has not previously been publicly identified, warns that China poses a secret threat to Russia's security. Its officials say Beijing is increasingly trying to recruit Russian spies and gain access to sensitive military technology, sometimes by luring disillusioned Russian scientists, the New York Times reports. Intelligence officials say China is spying on Russian military activity in Ukraine to study Western weapons and tactics. They fear Chinese academics are laying the groundwork for territorial claims against Russia. They also say Chinese intelligence agents are spying in the Arctic under the cover of mining companies and university research centers. All of these threats are outlined in an internal 8-page FSB planning document that outlines priorities for combating Chinese espionage. It is undated, which may indicate that it is a draft, but the context suggests that it was drafted in late 2023 or early 2024. The document is said to provide the most detailed insight to date into Russian counterintelligence views on China. Russia has endured years of Western financial sanctions since the invasion, largely thanks to China. After all, China is the largest buyer of Russian oil and a supplier of vital computer chips, software, and military components. Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Putin have been pushing a borderless partnership, but a secret FSB memo shows that borders do exist. There is a political leadership, and they are all for rapprochement with China. And then there is intelligence and security services, and they are extremely suspicious, says Andrei Soldatov, an expert on Russian intelligence services who lives in exile in the UK. At the same time, Putin seems to be well aware of the risks of rapprochement with China and still continues to pursue a course of rapprochement, which may indicate that the US has little chance of changing this choice. Putin believes that he can dive deeper into China's embrace, and this is risky, but justified. We also see that there are people within the system who are skeptical about such a course, says Alexander Gaboev, director of the Carnegie Eurasia Center.
President Donald Trump's deployment of the National Guard to Los Angeles in response to immigration protests is the latest in a long history of U.S. elected officials sending troops in hopes of thwarting unrest connected to civil rights protests. According to Associated Press, National Guard troops are typically deployed for a variety of emergencies and natural disasters with the permission of governors in responding states, but Trump, a Republican, sent about 1,000 California National Guard troops to Los Angeles despite the objections of California Governor Gavin Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, both Democrats. The streets were quiet in the sprawling city of 4 million people early Monday, but by early afternoon, protesters were seen marching and standing at an intersection with a sign reading "Trump must go now," as police officers stood nearby. ABC 7 Los Angeles captured the scene in aerial footage. More demonstrations were expected as the Trump administration intensified the standoff with state officials. While much of the city was spared from any violence, clashes swept through several downtown blocks and a handful of other places. The week-long tally of immigrant arrests in the area climbed above 100, federal authorities said. Many more were arrested while protesting, including a prominent union leader who was charged with conspiring to impede an officer during a demonstration. California Governor Gavin Newsom said he planned to file a lawsuit against President Donald Trump in response to the administration's extraordinary deployment of the National Guard to confront immigration protesters who took to the streets in Los Angeles. According to Associated Press, Newsom, a Democrat, said that commandeering a state's National Guard without consulting the governor of that state is illegal and immoral. The streets of the sprawling city of 4 million people were mostly quiet Monday morning, the day after crowds blocked off a major freeway and vandalized self-driving cars. Law enforcement responded with tear gas, rubber bullets, and flashbang grenades. Sunday's protests were centered in several blocks of downtown and a handful of other places.